Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Upkeep Pledge Pros podcast, a podcast dedicated to unmatched value and unwavering support. Today, we have Upkeep Ambassador Chris Pepin returning to the podcast from Progressive Reliability. He is the founder and managing director of Progressive Reliability. So Chris is back. We had a little hiatus, and we wanted to bring Chris back and chop it up and talk all things talent strategy. Chris had a webinar on for Upkeep several months ago, I think December, and it was a big hit. We had a lot of noise around that, and we know that talent is a huge thing in the industry. It has been for years. And today, I wanted to chop it up with Chris, and we wanted to talk just talent strategies from his 5 pillars to all kinds of things, and it's going to be awesome. So, Chris, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bryan. I'm looking forward to this.
Very welcome. I'm so glad that we were able to connect again. You and I are kindred spirits. We understand that without people, you achieve nothing, right? People achieve all things for business. They make up the business. They make up the culture, every single thing. And today, I wanted to pick your brain on talent strategy. We're in 2024 now. We had some thoughts about 2024 when we were in 2023, talking about the looming manpower walk out from a skilled trades perspective, and how we're going to backfill that knowledge. Where's it going to go? How are we going to fill the spots? Do we need to fill the spots? Is it the right amount of spots? And you and I, before we recorded, we're just talking about that. So why don't we just jump right into it? I'll let you lead.
Well, I appreciate it. Some high level facts is that I think what I'm seeing right now, manufacturer reporting today, it's 36% more difficult than 2018 to find people. Sure. So, that's just kind of the manufacturer report on where people are. It may feel a lot worse depending on where you are, but that's kind of the stat we've got. And the other thing is 74% of manufacturers believe that the skills needed for manufacturing jobs are changing rapidly. And it's not necessarily the skills to think about. It's like being bilingual, working in different environments. So there's a lot going. Skills is a big word.
Yeah.
And so we're noticing, we do a lot of bilingual recruitment. I've got a Spanish only site, so we have to speak somebody who has Spanish as first language.
Sure.
We've done a couple like that. So yeah, it's what's required is definitely not staying the same.
Yeah, no doubt. It's funny that you bring up the language thing. I didn't even think about that from that perspective, but it's funny connecting it to Upkeep. Upkeep now is available in several languages, right? Because as you said, the workforce is dynamic, it's diverse, it's changing. And, we have to ensure that everybody who touches our platform can interact with it.
Right. And then also, how do you unify all the information that's within it? So I was just talking to a company the other week. They need an MRO resource for Latin America, but their sites are in Mexico, the US, and France. So their parts are in those 3 languages. They got one in the UK as well. So you talk about 3 languages. How do you unify your part strategy? It's an interesting world.
That's wild. And with certain languages, some words don't exist. So it's
part numbers are pretty good. So yeah, you're a little simpler there.
True.
But in terms of process, that gets pretty interesting.
Right. And creating a standard language, not just language as in like place language, but like your cultural language. Like we may call a claw hammer a carpenter's hammer, right? But they call it a claw hammer, or a ball peen hammer is a machinist hammer. You know what I mean? So like there's that other dichotomy there that makes it a little more difficult.
Yeah, that's where your British and your American English still doesn't line up in terms of nomenclature stuff. But anyway, that's far too big and complicated. I think we've got some simpler solutions that that we can focus on right now. I think one thing that was interesting we were talking about before we jumped on the podcast is culture, and that's a word that gets thrown around everywhere, and it's a tricky word because it means a lot of things to a lot of people. So the best definition I've found, and the one we go on, is culture is the things we say and do to get what we want. Plain and simple. Yeah. So I think that was something. Yeah, we were at a conference last week and presented that, and we just, I hope nobody here has to spend a lot of time reading contracts, but if you've ever read a legal contract, the first 1 to 17 pages are just definitions of terms. The reason they do that is because we want to make sure that, this word doesn't have a different meaning for a different person. Because forget about the languages we were just covering. We want to make sure we've got what we're all seeing the same thing.
Right.
And so when we talk about culture, we want to make sure that we're really defining, okay, what does this mean?
Right.
And there is no right or wrong culture. There's a right or wrong culture for you. So, we're talking about some of the places you've worked in the past. Some people are all about the spicy environments, and that's okay. Some people like high conflict. Some people want to take the best possible pay, regardless of the environment, because I'm working 2 weeks on, 1 week off. So there's no wrong culture. You just have to own what yours is and be very clear about what that looks like for somebody, what works, what doesn't.
Right.
And I think that's just a really simple place to start, instead of all confusing HR kind of terms. It doesn't have to be that complicated. It's just like, hey, how do we identify?
Right.
And on both sides, this is great about us, and this is the thing that crushes people. It's like, just own that. Some people are really into that stuff.
Yeah, but 100%. And also I think that really the unifying thing there is ensuring that it still remains professional, right? And that it isn't like an environment where, yeah, you have some, like I've worked in some really hardcore environments where it's like, you do your job, you don't do it well, you're out of there. You have to perform at a very high level all the time, and there's no room for BS, right?
High
But
standards.
exactly, but it's
Standards are
still
great.
very professional, right? It's not like if I don't perform well, they're going to be like, "Oh, you stupid idiot," blah blah blah. It's still very professional. So, like, I think the unifying thing there is to ensure that culturally there's no like toxicity and there's no like backstabbing and things like those things are going to happen, right? But as far as the working culture, you're absolutely right. There's some dudes I know who want to do FIFO, fly in, fly out. They want to fly to a mine. Well, you choose Australia, like you and I were talking before. They want to fly to a mine, work for a month, go home for 2 weeks, and fly back for a month. They don't care what that month entails. It could be 20 hours a day. That's what they want.
Yeah.
Now, somebody else might be like, that's the worst culture I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
Right.
And that's a really important point for everybody to consider. So it's not, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, being straightforward and transparent with people is certainly the way. The other thing is, what you mentioned, you reminded me of something when you were talking about just the accountability and the high standards. We were working with a maintenance manager, fantastic guy. And this is a story we just told at another conference a few weeks ago. Because people are flabbergasted. This is going on all the time. So I'm going to get to a really good point here. He was making $185,000 a year, car paid for, phone paid for, like great benefits, everything. But culturally, he could not lead his maintenance team because the company didn't recruit enough talent. They didn't have enough talent. So he had people showing up 4 hours late for their shift. They wouldn't fire him because they didn't want to fill his team, even though he was highly paid. He was willing to leave. Do you know what his number was? He's like, look, if I find the right environment, the right place, where I have the tools and assets to excel at what I want to do, from 185, do you know what he was looking for?
120.
130. Yeah. All day. This happens a lot. I'm not saying that, come work for ProRely and take a down round. I'm just saying that, ultimately what we're looking at is the right fit for a person is not salary anymore, that kind of salary first. And a lot of talent acquisition teams that we speak to are afraid to interview a candidate who was making X and now is willing to come down and be like, well, they're not going to last. It's like, that was 6-8 years ago. Today, people are looking for the right environment. They're looking for the right shift flexibility. Some people want night work. If I work 2 nights in a row and I get 3 nights off and I have a rotating shift, 2 12-hour shifts and then 3 days off, like, perfect. You can plan your family and schedule things around it and be able to, live your life in between, and that works well. So that's another important thing. I just want to encourage people to look at what are the, in terms of flexible work arrangements and in terms of, the options that are available out there. There's a lot of practical ways to present what you have. And the other thing is, because we see different companies all the time, we see all the colors and flavors and ways that this can be presented. What you have today, and you might be stuck in because you've been working at your site for 8-10 years, might be a tremendous advantage versus someplace else. So anytime you're interviewing candidates, ask about what kind of shift they've been on, what they're looking for, what they've heard about. That's great. Whenever you're talking to other people at other sites, just understanding what they do and conversationally, like, hey, what are you guys doing to win people? Like, what do you offer? How does that look? Like, just that base level of curiosity can go a long way to help people realize the assets they have. Because that's the first thing we do on onboarding call is understand. We just did a 1 hour onboarding call because we go through
Your
detail.
your 85 point checklist.
I got 88. I don't use them
88.
all. Yeah, but I don't use them all. But yeah, we have 88 to go through because when we're presenting an opportunity
It's
to a
necessary.
candidate, yeah, we want to understand. We want to work through the job, right? It's not just like
Sure.
getting the fill. It's like, hey, we want to work through because, I mean, why
It's
go find new
yeah.
clients every other week when you can just service the ones you have
It's
really well and keep them?
it's just like addressing a failure mode on a PM, right?
Exactly.
You can just scratch the surface and go, oh, I don't see it. I'm just going to do this minor stuff and move on. Or you take that 88 point inspection and you go and you find the failure mechanism, and then you don't have to keep revisiting it.
So I don't know that our 5 pillars document is maybe FEMA level
No,
doc.
I know. I just a
Well,
correlation there. It's like
well,
the in-depthness of it, right?
the point is like, yeah, but the reason we wrote the 5 pillars was just to be able to get people in front of, okay, these are the different phases of the talent cycle. So you guys can grab it. It's our website, prorely.com/5pillars, and just download it for free. It's like 24 pages, lots of data. But the point is,
it's good.
yeah. And the reason we did that was just want to arm the industry with, okay, this is what's going on, because there's application generation, which you need KPIs around. I'll cover that in a second. Everybody's thinking, I need applicants. I mean, even more people. Not necessarily. There's also application nurturing, which is
No one does.
Nobody does it. You have so many people that you've interviewed in the last 3 years that are phenomenal and are probably back on the market. And you need to call them again because they're sitting in a system somewhere, and track them down. Like, those are free hires. You know what I mean? Like, there's people in your LinkedIn account. There's people I don't know. I've got thousands of numbers on my cell phone. Half the time like now it's even pulling from my email. So like, there's so many contacts underneath you. Just to go through the exercise of who you've spoken to in the past around a role, take another crack at it. That's a great way to work with people. And there's also, like, let's face it, I heard a statistic that the very, very best people in our industry have a job in 3 weeks flat. It's like an off-market deal in real estate. They move and nobody else sees it. It's just like, if somebody's super good at what they do, chances are good they're not going to need to market their position. It does happen to good people. They're gone fast. So when you're great at what you do and you have a good network, you tend to move off market quickly.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of the people we see. 3 weeks. If you got a 4-month hiring process, yeah.
Oh, dude, it's so funny when you were talking about, like, the maintenance manager you're working with. You described 2 of my past jobs in one. I made north of what that guy was making, and I still chose to leave and come home so that I could not travel every week, so that I could be with my kids, watch my son grow up, because I missed the first 3-4 years of my daughter growing up, right? And then I went to a job that was more culturally not culture. It was different, totally different culture. Not my culture at all, but it was more work-life balance friendly. But it was not conducive to my professional growth. It was like a step backwards.
Right.
And so I left that, and now I work for Upkeep. And sure as shit, I was working for this other company, and Upkeep scooped me up before I even said bye to the other company, right?
Yeah. How did they find you?
So Upkeep?
Yeah.
I've known Upkeep for years.
Okay.
Tell me more. I've been doing and working with Upkeep since 2016. So I was a customer of theirs when I managed several locations around the country. I implemented Upkeep at 6 of those locations. I stayed in touch with them. I got connected with the maintenance community when the maintenance community came out in, I think, 2019. I was doing free webinars. I was doing content, all these things with Upkeep. And then 2022, I started consulting for them. So I was a consultant for them for 2023. I was a consultant for them for, like, I don't know, 9 months. And I was still working at my other job. And they were like, hey, we want you to come full time.
It's a relationship. It's not a job. You had a relationship with the company. And this is another thing. We're advising a humongous building product supplier with a very large legal contract. So I'm not going to name names here, but we're advising them on 17 of their sites nationwide, what they're doing for their maintenance talent strategy.
Nice.
And one of the real quick wins that we established for them is I asked, how do you feel about the contractors that you have coming on site? So this isn't like staff augmentation. This is like you got folks, trades coming in. There's obviously lots of people. What do they think about your site when they come through? How well do you know these other contract trades people you're bringing in, or your support for special projects, tear down people? I mean, how do you treat them? What do you think of them? That's a great resource. They might really want to work with you. And like I said, if it starts with a relationship, it's not really a poach. It's just a natural progression.
Sure.
Like, this isn't about, we're not asking people to go harvest everybody from every vendor you have. It's just a matter of, hey, when you got great relationships and it makes a connection, are you leaving somebody better than you found them? Are you giving them a better opportunity than they have already? Right. That's a natural progression, as opposed to this kind of, we got to force them through. That thing doesn't really work anymore.
Yeah.
So that's another piece on the nurture. Then your interview, you are selling your company. So even though you have screened people out, we understand that you're not going to take, I think we go through 80 to 100 candidates to get 12 screenings to get 4 interviews to get 1 hire.
Dang.
That's the number. Yeah, that's KPIs, right? That's our and because we track that, we know where the failures are. Right? We know where the issues are. I've seen sites where they're bringing on, how many people they're bringing on site as opposed to the ones they're hiring. That was a big problem. It's like, look,
sure.
You are doing way too many plant tours. You're losing an option. You need to be screening people out better with this. And then, and so back to the interview piece, you're selling people on your company because you may not choose to hire them. That's okay. That's natural. But they should be putting the word on the street that you guys are buttoned up. You have a good process. You followed up. Just the basic courtesy sets you at a level above 80% of the rest of the world because everybody's so reactive.
Yeah, no doubt.
So that's another good piece, right? So we got to understand that we're not just interviewing people. We're selling the dream of our brand and our company.
But also, too, like the interview thing, I only one time in my life I went through, and it was my past job. The interview process was ridiculous. I mean, it was like phone screen, phone screen, phone screen, phone screen. Okay, come in. Okay, meet this person. Okay, now you got to do a Zoom call with these 8 people. And then you got to come in and meet these 2 people. And then they'll let you know. And I'm like, I got other people want to hire me.
It's like, you make a decision. How much impact are you going to have in an organization where they show you up front that they're incapable of making a decision?
Why do you think I left?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like, okay, so like your hands are tied on this for 3 months. How tied are my hands going to be in terms of implementing new practices and what needs to be done? Yeah. How many levels of approval and management do I have to go through? Again, that's for you. For me, that's not for everybody. Some people love the gamesmanship. That's not a bad culture, by the way. Sure. It's just not right for you. Some people want the process and the checks, and they like that game, and that's okay. I don't think it's the most effective hiring process, but again, if that's what you're looking for, somebody who can endure a ton of process and being committed to the logo of the brand, whatever you have, that's the right person for you.
I even did 4 pages. I wrote a 4-page. They gave me like a thing I had to do, like a I don't even know what they called it. Not a test, but like it was like a question. It's like, hey, in this, what would you do in this? It was like build a maintenance manpower assessment and strategy for this circumstance. I did that shit. Because I'd been doing it my whole life. It was perfect. And even on top of all that, I mean, I got the job, right? Of course, but like it was like I would never want to do that again, honestly.
No, and that scares people too. So for the rest of the audience out there, we've got somebody we just onboarded yesterday. He's got a box of parts. He takes out the box of parts, identify. That's a great. I've talked to a couple.
I love that.
It doesn't have to be that complex, but somebody can talk the talk. They're really great at interviewing, especially when you're talking about maintenance level, skilled trades and technicians. It's like, okay, great. Here's a bunch of parts.
Yep, I've done that. I put welders. I've had welders literally. I'd bring them to the shop and say, "Make me a box. Cut this steel plate and weld me a box." Just to watch to see how they did it. I said, "There's no right or wrong way. I just want to see how you do it."
Yeah.
You learn a lot of cool stuff that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be this complicated test and whatnot. We have a former client who had to send everybody to a community college site, and it was like only on Thursdays that it was open to be this, and that you have to go through 3 times as many people. If that's important to you, though, by all means.
Sure.
It's just that you're gonna need to triple your number of applicants and screens in order to get people through. So that's part of that, and that's one of those, the output metric management. People just don't track how many applicants do you get, how many do you screen, how many do you actually have on a plant tour, how many start, of those that start, how many make it past 90 days. That's the number you need. So it's the 90-day number that you need to screen through to. It's not the start date when you have fallouts, right? Because it's
right.
It doesn't happen often in our world because we've gotten good at screening that out, but it does take place. So we need, even as we stack our numbers, I think we're at like a 97% success rate on our hourly hires in terms of getting all
past
the way through
90 days.
Yeah, all the way through. Yeah. So we've been testing those numbers. Like I said, I've been doing some,
well, the fact that you know that matters.
Yeah, okay, so shameless plug. In the last 5 years, we've done 184 hires with that 97% success rate. Say 85% of those are, trades and technical people.
Yep.
And that amounted to about 3.7 million in fees that we've collected.
Nice.
That number should be a lot higher, but I had a bit of a hole in 2020 and 21. So yeah, that's the experience that I'm bringing, just kind of like some throwaway numbers so you guys know where I'm coming from.
Keep going.
Yeah, this is not, I didn't chat GPT this conversation. So that's kind of on that. If you want to talk about the next piece, I know we were talking about the 5 pillars and I was just brushing on.
No, you're good. You're good.
So we talked about application generation, which big, that's your advertising, and there's a lot that goes into that. Then you've got your nurturing, which nobody does. Right. Then you have the interviews, right? That's a big piece. So people focus on the 1 and the 3. Like, I need more applicants. I want to interview, right? So 4 and 5, nobody pays attention to. Number 4 is onboarding. So I know the SMRP guide for training is 80 hours a year above and beyond what you need to do for safety training and regulatory training. To keep your CMRP, you have to do 50 credit hours every 3 years as well. But
I have it. I've renewed it.
Yeah, all y'all. Yeah. Upkeep is heavy with CMRPs. So here's the piece though. 27 hours is the average amount of training at any given site
for a whole year.
Yeah, that's the average, right? And how much of that is safety training and what's required, right? I think for new hires, it's something like 47 or 46, somewhere in there. So that's a big opportunity. But here's the thing we've learned talking to our clients. We talk about this. Do you do lunch and learns? Do you have your vendors in to do training? That all matters. And you're probably doing stuff that you're not counting and you're not thinking about it. So the lunch and learns, the vendor trainings, there's on-the-job training, but once you put some structure around it, it's got a little more value for it. I'm not saying it so that you can put it in a book for accounting or marketing. I'm just saying, like, hey, let's pay attention to what we're doing and make that part of our onboarding process. When you put some structure around it, then you don't forget stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. We in the past, managing, multiple locations and tons of, leading tons of people. When I was a maintenance manager, technicians did not go on call until after 3 months. Mm-hmm. They needed 3 months of OJT. And that was even if they were a senior guy. If they knew the job, they were a heavy equipment mechanic, whatever. It was about understanding the way our business worked and understanding the operations and the times and when and how and where. And they weren't going to go on call until 3 months later. And I remember the technicians, when we were low staff, we would hire new people, and the technician was like, God, yes, I can't wait to get off, to have the on-call rotation be much bigger than it is now. And I'm like, well, you got to wait 3 months.
Yeah.
And it was also like an incentive to help drive the education and the training of those other technicians through mutual OJT, because they needed each other.
Right. Yeah. And there's another thing you need to work with on that, because when you move somebody they spend the 3 months on the day shift, getting OJT, and then they flip to night shift.
Well, no. That just goes on, meaning they go on call. So we had an on-call schedule. That didn't mean they worked night shift. It just means that when they were off shift, they were on call to be on shift.
Right. What I'm talking about is we have clients who are, night shift is a popular opening, right? People are trying to find their B shift and their night shifts. What I'm saying is a lot of night shift people have to come in on the day shift and then they rotate.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a tricky place for a lot
I give them 3 days off and then they go to night shift.
Yeah, so that's another thing where you have to pay attention in terms of your onboarding. When you make that transition, you're not just dropping them on their own, because that's a new transition you have to do. Because a lot of times they just flip people to a shift and 2 weeks later they bounce. So anytime you're doing a move like that, again, this is the onboarding piece that I'm trying to cover. It's super important to make sure that you are getting good coverage and getting them like actually in and bonded with their team, right?
Right.
Building that trust with one another, making that move to that shift worthwhile, making the shift differential worthwhile. I mean, I got a company who's paying like a 67-cent shift differential and they're losing people left and right. It's like, okay, could you make it $4? Like, in terms of what you're bleeding.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that big, but if you look at the cost, it's probably cost them $6 an hour in terms of their churn.
Yes.
So, pay it to your people. Make that, you'll get your best people on night shift and they're all doing a lot of, you have to be super competent because you're doing the reactive stuff. So anyway, those are some onboarding notes and thoughts for sure. And then the final piece is retention and ascension.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're onboarded, they're part of the team, great. But how are you retaining them? How are you growing them? What are they growing? And by the way, this is about, there's no wrong culture. You can hire people that want to be stable and they want to do maintenance. They want to do this position, electricians, you name it. They don't want to go to management. They just want to know their stuff, know where everything is. And it's a lot simpler because you don't really have to think and search for parts. You don't have to, you know who the guy is. And some people, like, that's a great retention piece because it's like, hey, I've been here for 20 years. I know where everything is. I know the bones of this thing inside and out. And that's okay too. But making sure that you understand what is your retention strategy and how are you going to send them, even if it's just ascending widely to being a key member of that team.
Sure.
That's another piece that you got to pay attention to. What are you doing there? Because with your best people, they're also the most likely to be neglected, because it's like, hey, I know you. Yeah, you got this. We're okay. Well, you have to ask questions. As a leader, it's your job to ask questions. It is not your team's job to tell you stuff. I know we like to think it's that way, right? We all want it. Yeah, come to me. But if there's one blind spot we all have, it's seeing who we are from somebody else's perspective, right? So that curiosity of asking your team what's going on and having structured questions, that is one thing you can go to ChatGPT or you name it for and look it up. It's not hard to Google some great questions and find 10, 20 that you like and pick your favorite 2, whatever. Do something to make sure you're asking people questions and being curious about where they're at, what's going on, how they are, how to run those meetings. It's super important. Again, a little bit of structure, stick it in a file and use it every time. It makes life easier.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked for companies that don't require reviews for hourly employees, and you better believe that I was doing yearly reviews. You know what I mean? And I never had any issues with that because I focused on building relationships with everybody, right? So my goal was to be just have a genuine relationship with the PM guy. I'm the maintenance manager or the director of maintenance and reliability. I knew everyone. I would fly to those sites and meet with them all the time. And it was super easy in that regard. But you're right. A lot of people, they just don't take the time to understand the people that work for them, and that work with them. And, talking about not everybody wants to grow and be the next maintenance manager, right? But I also had people come to me and say, hey, look, I love being a mechanic, but I want to learn a new skill. And I know that you have a machinist that works in this shop. I'd love to learn how or shadow him as a machinist. Great. I'd love to learn how to weld. Great. Right. So we had guys, we did a lot of crane work and stuff like that. And then we had guys who did a lot of like welding and fab. And sometimes the welding and fab guys were like, hey, I want to help you pull the drive motors out of that crane. I want to learn something. And that is like the ascension of their education, right? It's moving them up the rungs of their own personal knowledge so that whether they stay and they become a even better employee or they go and become a better employee somewhere else, you've helped them achieve something.
This is the basic human thing. We crave 2 things: consistency and novelty, which are opposing. But if you've ever, I don't know, been in front of Netflix and found yourself watching something you've seen before because you don't want to test the new one.
Oh, I watch the same stuff over and over and over again.
Right. because we want the consistency. And then sometimes we're willing to make a bet on the novelty. But I mean, my Pandora stations are like, they've been the same stations for 10 years now. I mean, one of the joys of being in your 40s is new music is scary. But you know, like you just find that like you go into this rut because you don't have the time to put it in that thing. So the point of what you're saying though is, yeah, giving people some novelty gets them thinking and gets the wheels turning, and you have to provide that. And the other piece on training is so many of our clients offer training. They don't have a system in place to encourage it. So yeah, we'll pay for this or what, you know. I got it out of somebody yesterday. They're like, yeah, actually we do tuition reimbursement. We have up to 10 grand of student loan forgiveness. Like, why isn't that on your website? So yeah, but that's one of our 88. So we want to dig that stuff, but ultimately, if you do have those training as a leader, or you know, even as a practitioner, go for that stuff, ask for it. It's available, and everybody, you know, I don't know many companies that shy away from wanting to train their people or hire people who are trainable or coachable. So
it's an investment in your own business.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like the irony is like you're supposed to make your people more valuable and then pay them more. Like, you know, exactly. Over time, that's kind of how it works, and that's how you develop good people, right?
Yeah, I had
increase their value.
Yeah, I had an apprenticeship program with one of my shops in Baltimore, and there was you know, one or two young men that decided that they wanted to be heavy equipment mechanics, never been mechanics before in their life. And I had set milestones for their training program. I paid for them to go to welding school. I paid for them to go to all the Caterpillar specific troubleshooting engines and power chains. They had designated hours to work with senior technicians weekly. And when they got out of that, they got a $5 raise, $5 an hour when that was done at the end of 6 months. And then they got put right.
10 grand a year plus, yeah.
They got put right back once that apprenticeship was over, and they learned skills. Right now, they can, after that 6 months to a year, they started applying those skills on their own and with their teammates. So they were cast into the reality of the business, and they were able to make their own way. One of them, I'd love to say his name. I'm going to have him on the podcast one of these days. But one of them started out as a junior mechanic and was the foreman of our entire shop in 3 years. He put in the work. That man did everything he possibly could, and he soaked it up. I mean, yeah, he's a very brilliant young man, but you know, he did everything. Now he doesn't work there anymore, but now he's a lead field mechanic for the Caterpillar dealer.
Yeah. And that's where you get passion and grit together. So if you don't enjoy what you're doing and you're not switched on to it, no amount of effort and force is going to get you there. But when you have somebody who's switched on, or when you're switched on about something, you've got to encourage that.
Yeah.
You know, it's an interesting threshold, because some people want to learn every single new thing and they don't want the consistency, right? They're too far into the novelty side. Ultimately though, when you have that right mix of, hey, I've got an ability to run with this, you know, I enjoy the heck out of it and I can build something with it. It is work, but it doesn't feel like work. We talk about, you know, in terms of high performing teams, you want to go for like an 8 positive conversation to 1 negative conversation ratio. You know, at the low end is like 1.7 to 1 is like one of the lowest performing teams, right? Where everything is just as negative as it is positive. You know what I mean? It's like, if it's just 1 to 1, like there's tough times, but ultimately, like for people to be the most effective, they should have 8 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction. And that just means like, hey, I got it done. And that's by the way, with each other, not necessarily the machines, because we know our maintenance folks, and you don't have to like the machines every day. They need to be beaten into submission sometimes, but in terms of with one another, it's really important. This isn't like touchy-feely, you're great, good job. It's like, hey, we got this, we did this, we accomplished this is what we did. I mean, I'm talking about this from a maintenance perspective, not from a, you know, whatever, sit around in a circle and talk about our problems perspective.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. And you know, I don't know if this is similar, but I did read something about like when they did like evaluations of Navy SEALs, and they had them like, there was like a box that had like an X in the middle, and it was like trust and something else, like another metric. And it was like the top in both were never the guys that they picked. It was always guys who were like 80% of the way there. And there was, someone can correct me, but they wrote a whole article about why that is, and how you're not getting the guy who is like an ace 10 out of everything all the time, because that can be problematic. But they're getting the people who are just so consistent, and like, I don't even know how to explain it, but there's a thing. I don't know what it's called. I wish I would have looked it up before we talked, but it shows literally a chart of how they graph it and how they go off it. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. But it's wild.
Yeah, well,
Talking
consistency.
about high performing teams is what I'm at.
Yeah, and consistency is it. I mean, you that's that's also the trust piece, right? Like, you know what you're going to get from somebody. This is why, certain I won't say characters, if you know what you're going to get, you know what I mean, and they're predictable, even if they're a little, might be a little more high performing, a little more eccentric because of it, but that predictability allows for some of those differences, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see where you come from. I don't know that one exactly.
I don't know. Yeah. I wish I could.
Yeah, I haven't checked in on any of Jocko's stuff in about a year
Oh,
now.
no,
So
I don't think it was
maybe
from
get teed
him.
up on the.
Yeah. It's just, I was reading about, high performing teams, leadership, things like that. And it had come up in one of the things that I was reading, and it was just kind of weird, not weird, but kind of cool to see that the defining factors of how these people view themselves and others in their team performance was not what you would think,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, I understand. I understand where you're going, or you're coming from with that one. But you're right. I can't quote that one either.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it's been an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
appreciate you having me on. For anybody that wants to look into the 5 pillars, again, it's free. Just PRORELI.com/5 pillars. You can download that and go through it. If you have any other questions, we're creating a lot of content, Bryan, just so you know. I'm just giving it to the industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want people to be better at hiring, to have an awareness, something, for the folks that are really suffering from these challenges. We're creating, I got a newsletter on LinkedIn too. So if you go to my profile and a newsletter, you can subscribe to that. Like, I don't know, I started a couple months ago. We got about 1,000 people so far.
Nice.
That are in it. So yeah, so again, that's just like the value, the process. I'm not trying to, nobody on this conversation or listening wants to be in HR right now. It's more a matter of like, hey, where are some places, where can I get some bits and tips and ideas that can make a difference, and just start paying attention to this.
Yeah.
And so speaking at as many conferences as we can.
I was going to ask you, are there any conferences coming up that you're going to be at?
Yeah, I've got I got an SMRP Indiana
Chapter.
and yeah, they're chapter 1 in 2 weeks. I'm going to go speak at.
Yep.
A couple great people there, and then otherwise it's in the fall, and we have submitted. So we're still waiting for results on a couple other conferences we're going to do, but we're always submitting what we've got, starting to provide this stuff.
Cool. Yeah, we will be at Food Packaging Northwest next week in Portland. We will be at Waste Expo in May in Las Vegas.
Okay.
Of course, we will be at SMRP in October. I'm sure you will be there.
We will.
Awesome.
Whether
awesome.
or not I'm on stage, that's the question.
Yeah. So, did you submit abstracts?
Right. Yeah.
Nice,
I've got
nice.
abstracts for them out for sure.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's been great, Chris. I always enjoy our conversations. You and I hit it off at SMRP last year. And I stay true today as I did then, in saying that your partnership with us is very, very important. It's very strategic. It is the industry in a sense, right? The people make the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't thank you enough. Upkeep, we greatly appreciate your partnership and look forward to doing more and more and more with you. So.
Well, thanks for having me. It was great to have another conversation. I hope there was some value for your audience as well. We're here, you can find me on LinkedIn or, website, you name it. We respond, we check all our channels. So happy to help anybody. Just if you have questions, conversations, something I can do to point you in the right direction, we're happy to do so.
No doubt. Thank you very much, Chris. This has been Chris and Bryan, the Upkeep Pledge Pros podcast. We'll see you on the next one, Chris.
All right. Thanks a lot.
See you, man.